Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a special edition as we delving into the mental state in Palestine. Today we are honored to be joined by Zohra Sooliman, co-founder of Gift of the Givers and director for K-Line Counseling Services and a seasoned counseling psychologist rather. I'm Hawa Solomon. Shukran so much for joining us today in this discussion. We'll explore the psychological impact of living in a region marked by genocide and unrest. Join us as we uncover the challenges faced by individuals and families in Palestine and shed light on the vital role of mental health support in fostering resilience and healing condition. Stay tuned for this insightful conversation that aims to raise awareness and promote understanding of the human experience amidst adversity. So let's now welcome our special guest, Zohra Sooliman, all the way from Pietermaritzburg. Assalamu alaikum to you, Zohra, and Jazakallah so much for your time.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Hawa and the listeners of Hilaal TV. And Jummah Mubarak to you on this blessed Friday.
Jazakallah, shukran so much, and the same to you. Now, Zohra, can you paint us a picture of the current humanitarian situation in Palestine, particularly regarding the lack of sanitation, the lack of food, and of course, safe water?
Okay. So we all know from the last 100 and I'm not sure what we're standing on today, but nearly 4 months, we were getting news feeds every day of extreme levels of hunger, starvation. We've noticed how people in Palestine, particularly regarding, how large number of families share small portions of food. We've even heard of people eating grass, children eating grass. As far as safe water is concerned, there's no safe drinking water. And we know what happens if there's no safe drinking water. You're going to have diarrhea and all kinds of waterborne diseases. They cannot mix their baby formulas with that water. They can't cook with it. They can't drink it. But they don't have a choice because there is less intake. And because of this less intake of water, this will result in dehydration. Then you have the sanitation. Everyone's implicated, adults and children, women, mothers with babies, everyone. The population is in constant flux. And wherever they set up a makeshift shelter, there are no toilets and bathrooms. If there is, it will be a few toilets to a few thousands of people. And what happens if you need the toilet in a hurry? What if you have diarrhea and you need to use the toilet? You're going to use the land around you, which is going to cause a further health problem due to the sewage in open spaces. What about privacy and dignity? So many people to such few toilets, hence they cannot wait so long. So they use the open spaces, and this implicates their sense of dignity. Women, young girls, mothers who have delivered, and their babies. For females, it's more challenging because of the monthly menstruation. These are the times when you need to practice more hygiene and to prevent infections. And this is not possible with the sanitation, poor sanitation, and the lack of water. This is not, as I said, not possible. And this applies to mothers who have delivered and they're in their nifas. And babies who produce on average 8 nappies normally, and more than that if they have diarrhea. Now, how can you wash them and clean them properly? And due to the shortage of all the above, as well as the short supply of diapers, pads, sanitary towels, this leads to nappy rash and other kinds of infections for the women as well.
So the list is actually quite extensive when you ask a question like that, and it seems that there's no end to it. But inshallah, I want to look at some of the common mental health conditions and challenges faced by individuals living in Palestine, Zohra, particularly in Gaza and other heavily affected areas, and how does particularly how does it affect these people, particularly regarding the mental well-being, rather, on both adults and children. So looking at the mental conditions.
So again, everyone is affected, adults and children. the kind of challenges that they are facing, you see anxiety, lots of anxiety, depression, grief. There's no more PTSD. There can't be PTSD. PTSD means post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
There is no beginning and there's no end, so there is no post. We call this, it's now coined CTSD, continuous stress, continuous continuous stress disorder, traumatic stress disorder. And I was told by one of the professors who works extensively in Gaza, our professor Ashraf Kaji from Stellenbosch University, he goes up and down to Gaza. He works with the Gaza Mental Health Program. And he said to me that OCD is also highly prevalent in Palestine. You find a lot of anger issues and domestic abuse, which is highly prevalent due to the unemployment rate of 40%. Men are physically challenged, and men are physically challenged due to the war injuries, due to their limbs being amputated after the injury of war. Men feel inadequate as they're unable to provide for their families financially and in every other way. They're unable to protect their families as they themselves get attacked and tortured. People who have had existing mental health conditions before the war, example, mood disorders or severe personality disorders and other mental health conditions, those conditions must be exacerbated now. Remember, they're not taking their chronic medication due to the war. The restrictions in movement, the concern for their safety first, and hospitals are bombed. The only mental health clinic hospital in Gaza was bombed. So I would think that many of the chronic cases of the pre-existing mental health conditions, they've probably gone into remission and relapsed.
Yeah.
Sorry, not remission, they've relapsed.
Relapsed, yeah. So what would you think are explain to us some of the barriers to accessing these mental health support and services in Palestine, besides it being the only mental health hospital being bombed? How does these challenges exacerbate the overall situation?
So firstly, as I said, all hospitals, clinics, most of the hospitals there, I think it was, I can't remember the stats, but I think there's 35, and a large percentage of that have been bombed. As I mentioned just now, the only mental health hospital in Gaza was also bombed. So already that's a physical barrier to having access to mental health support. But if I have to talk about they have, just like here in SA, many of them have the stigma with regard to mental health disorders, which prevents them from seeking the necessary support. So even if those structures are there, just like I said in South Africa, we still, whilst we've gone very far, we've broken a lot of the stigmas around mental health, where people think, there's something wrong with you, you're mad, you're crazy. But so in the very same way, there is that sort of thinking as well there.
Okay.
But of course, it's broken a lot from the past, but we still have a lot of work to do in that area. The very religious among them feel that it's improper to seek mental health support, especially if they're mourning their martyrs. So, like your martyrs are in Jannah, you have not lost them, they are alive. But at the end of the day, the mother who's lost her husband, the children who have lost their father, or their siblings, or their mother, whichever way it may be, when the war settles and when life has to resume to normal, then these people are suffering the same grief, loss, trauma, everything that we all would feel here. In addition to not having that care of the mother or the father or the support of both parents, the economical support, financial, and generally the houses, because if the houses are bombed, and in Gaza, when their houses are bombed and family members have died, then children get taken in by extended families, very rarely do they go to orphanages, but there are orphanages in Gaza. So that kind of thinking where they won't access or try to seek mental health support, and then that can lead to major problems in the future if trauma is not addressed early. However, they study, they do research at the universities, they do mental health programs, and they are training a lot of people in the country to make mental health accessible to the people of Gaza.
After the short break, I want to look at the access of medical care and support for pregnant women and childbirth, the prolonged absence of these medical checkups, prenatal care, and all the other mental health conditions that is affected by that, with Zohra Sooliman, co-founder of A Gift to the Givers and Director for Counselling Services, just after the short break. Do stay with us. The mental health conditions in Palestine and specifically in Gaza, the Palestinians are in dire need of our du'as, of course, and our support and the continuous boycott where we can. Very proud of our country for taking the apartheid state of Israel to the ICJ and still following up on that case. Alhamdulillah, we did get a verdict as well. But inshallah, we hope more comes from that. Online to discuss this matter further about the mental health conditions in Gaza is Zohra Sooliman from Gift to the Givers. And we elaborate now on some of the basic necessities like food for pregnant women. But Zohra, if you could just, before we go any further, could you just give us an update on the status of Gift of the Givers and them gaining access into Gaza with distributing aid?
So just to give you some background information, we have offices in Ramallah and in Gaza. And we have a women and child center, which is now bombed. It was bombed like a few weeks ago. We have a few clinics, and that has also been bombed, we've heard recently. Because we have offices there, our staff, since 2014, we've had our offices there. So ever since then, we've been running our different projects every day in Gaza. And these projects are like poverty relief, maybe winter warm, Ramadan iftars, we do that. We do the poor patient fund. So people who don't have money, but they need to get maybe things like prostheses or specs or something more than the usual medical care. We support those patients. We give those patients who need prostheses, we arrange that for them, wheelchairs, mobility equipment, and there's a whole lot of categories of projects that we are involved in. When the war started, we continued with this. We probably went into while the war was going on, we continued with our projects for about 2 weeks or so, because we were still able to get supplies and movement was still not such a problem. You know, they hadn't infiltrated Gaza completely at that time.
Okay.
But you would have heard on the news that one of our head staff had been targeted as he left the masjid after Fajr.
Yeah.
And so he was murdered with his brother. Our other staff had collectively lost 150 members of their family. So it became unsafe for them to move around. That was one. And two, there were no more supplies of goods to purchase from anywhere inside. And then by then they had already locked the borders. So you couldn't get anything up from outside either. So we had to stop our operations inside. But when that ceasefire happened in November, we managed to send in 7 trucks in total.
Alhamdulillah.
And so, and that's with our South African people's donations. And Alhamdulillah, that has reached the people and it's being distributed. And some of it is in warehouses and getting distributed slowly.
Okay.
Currently, we're not sure, only Allah knows, with the ceasefire being imminent, it seems like something might materialize from the discussions and negotiations, we are actually planning to move in now. So we're doing all the behind the scenes negotiations, preparations, and we'll be taking in medical professionals of different specialties. We're going in with about 20 psychologists and social workers,
Inshallah.
and to support them in terms of the mental health. So
Awesome.
that's our plan at the moment.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear about that. And inshallah, may Allah make it easy and open up the ways for yourself and all the other organization that needs to aid the Palestinians with the absolutely dire necessary needs that they need right now. Looking at the scarcity of the basic necessities like food and water, the impact with specifically that mental health of individuals, especially the pregnant women, as I mentioned, for example, who are giving birth in such dire conditions. What are their mental states like at the moment?
So look, we haven't gone in yet, right? We, like you get the news, we get the news, and we have our staff there, so we might get some extra or personal information.
Yeah.
But there is no food, as I mentioned earlier. We know that food is there to nourish us. It is there to supply us with the basic nutrients in the form of minerals and vitamins. We take supplements to feed our bodies in case we don't get them from our food, right? I'm drawing the scenario here in South Africa. But in Gaza, they are on the brink of famine. There's extreme starvation. There's nothing coming in. And if it's coming in drips and drabs. Gaza was a country that was getting about 400 trucks daily to sustain its needs, whether it was nutritional and otherwise, living needs, functional needs. At the moment, I think there's only about under 100 trucks that are allowed to go in. And that too, with lots of bureaucracy in terms of who can enter, when they'll enter, they wait in Rafah. When they enter, they've got to go all the way through Gaza to go to the Israeli checkpoint called Karim Shalom. Then they investigate the trucks if they want to take absolutely essential necessities. But when these necessities, some of them are even taken off, and then they go back to the Red Crescent, Red Cross warehouses, and then from there it's distributed. So it's quite a long, drawn, convoluted process when people are starving, they're on a brink of famine, and they're still taking so long to get food to these people. And as I mentioned, food is our nourishment. If we don't have food, then we cannot function optimally. I'm talking about function in terms of your organs, in terms of your physical health, your mental health. In every way, food is important. But these people, with the bureaucracy and the protocols that they have to follow, and with the drastic reduction in the amount of food that's going in, they are completely starved. And we know that food has a very satisfying feeling. So let's take, for example, in Ramadan, when we are fasting, and at the end of the day, when we are going to make our iftar, just putting that date in our mouth, or drinking that warm soup or halim, or drinking that cold milkshake, it's just such a satisfying feeling.
Yeah.
So psychologically, you're also satisfied. Food has that effect on the body and on the psyche, a sense of satiation or satisfaction. So you can imagine what this does, because they don't have it. Coming to your question about pregnant mothers, you've always had people say to a pregnant woman, you need to eat well because you're eating for two. And I don't totally believe in that, but I do believe that a pregnant woman needs to follow a healthy diet, make sure she gets in all the nutrients in her body, because her baby is dependent on the nutrition that she's getting, so that the fetus can grow healthy. But with the starvation in Gaza, and I believe there's 52,000 pregnant women when the war started. So all these women are starved, they're deprived of their basic necessities, especially food. And so this can lead to complications in birth. It can lead to complications during the delivery. It can lead to complications post-delivery. So these are the kind of implications of not having your basic necessities, especially food, for the pregnant mothers and the newborn babies.
Yeah,
it has drastic implications.
I've read an article recently on this pressing challenges of what pregnant women are faced with. As you said, an estimate of 50 to 52,000 pregnant women is in existent in Gaza, and 180 of them are giving birth daily under these conditions in tents, in plastic tents, with no medical checkups. And support during their pregnancy and childbirth. How does this prolonged absence of medical care affect the health outcomes of both mothers and their newborns, and even possibly, maybe having some baby blues or PND?
So I think very much so, like I just mentioned in the question that you asked earlier, that with so many hospitals being bombed, and you're saying 180 women are delivering every day, that's quite a large number in a small, concentrated area. And with so many hospitals being bombed, and with so many medical professionals that have been martyred and killed, there aren't many people to attend to the pregnant women who are going to deliver. Sometimes they can't even go and deliver in the hospital. Many of them are delivering, like you said, in the tents or in the rubble, wherever they are, wherever they find themselves, they're delivering there. They can't even go with the ambulance to the hospital because the Israeli army has stopped movement of cars, that's including ambulances. So these women cannot go even in ambulances. They can't go personally. They cannot go in their personal cars. They cannot move around, so they won't be able to get to a hospital. And the last thing that you'd think, at least we can call for an ambulance to take them to the hospital. But even the ambulances are targets of the bombing and the shelling. And these women can't get to hospitals. And if they do get to hospitals, the few doctors that are there are focusing on the other emergencies.
Yeah.
And I read such a beautiful story the other day where a woman describes how you're hearing all the other women giving birth, you're with them, and then she said the miracle that Allah is always present when new life is brought about. So they are on their own. If there's complications, they wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And there's no nursing care, there's no doctor care. You basically stay there. When your baby is born, then you've got to go back home. There's no place for you. There's no beds. So all of this, and then like you asked about the baby blues. I mean, there are so many women without war, without any other kind of external negative elements. They can still contract postnatal depression, postpartum depression. So all of those things are just completely neglected, ignored. Even if a woman is experiencing that, there's nothing she can do about it. She just has to give birth wherever she is and carry on with it. All of these things are only going to become a manifest when there's a ceasefire and when the dust has settled, so to speak. And then they're going to be able to make sense of what's happening. They're going to move the people around to get them to covered shelter. As you know, it's winter there currently. So then they are going to do all of that organizing and reshuffling and rehousing the people or replacing the people in more decent shelter. And then once they settle, when the basic needs are provided, then you're going to have the higher level needs that are going to surface, of which mental health is a huge part of it.
So literally an extreme flight or fright mode is what they are currently experiencing. More we talk about the
Constantly.
common psychological repercussions in these harsh conditions and some of the manifestations we expound on just after the short break with Zohra Sooliman from Gift to the Givers, co-founder of Gift to the Givers and director of the counseling services there. But back in a moment, stay with us. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Life Matters. And remember to follow any of our shows on our YouTube channel, Hilaal TV, Life Matters. And alhamdulillah, we have quite a season jam-packed. And any updates on the current state in Palestine, please follow our WhatsApp line as well. And if you want to connect with us, contact us via that line and send us any comments, questions, and queries. At the moment, we are discussing and we're continuously discussing Palestine, specifically the mental health conditions in Palestine, with co-founder, Gift to the Givers, and director for the K-Line Counseling Services is Zohra Sooliman online we have with her. Now, as a counseling psychologist, Zohra, what are some of the common psychological repercussions experienced by individuals living in such harsh conditions, and how do they manifest? If you can add also possibly if there's a ceasefire, inshallah, what approaches or strategies have you found to be effective in providing mental health support to Palestinians despite the limitations and constraints?
So you very rightly mentioned earlier that the people of Gaza are in a constant flight or fight mode.
Yeah.
So they're moving all the time. They are running for safety, running for cover. They've got to worry about their children, elderly, and they're usually given very little time when they are told, leave your homes or leave this place, this refugee camp or the temporary so-called safe place. And then they're asked to move again because they're going to be bombed. And so they're in a constant state of flight and fright and fight as well.
Yeah.
Because, you can imagine, they have to pull their children. They've got to pull whatever basic belongings they can get. So they're scared, but they're fighting as well. They're running away from it. And with that, we know our body has different hormones, right? So when you are in that state, the cortisol levels are very high, and because that's what's needed in the body. And usually you only need that. It's not supposed to be the normal balance of your body hormones. It's only there when you need to protect yourself. It has that functional purpose.
Yeah.
With the people in Gaza, especially under this 4-month war, they are constantly running and in that flight mode. So the cortisol levels in their bodies are very, very high. So biologically, it means that their bodies are in a very highly stressed state. And so they would have very high levels of anxiety. They'd be experiencing grief because of the multiple losses of loved ones in their families, in their extended families, and in their communities. It's a small community. So the multiple loss, so they'll not only grieve, but they will encounter complicated grief.
Yeah.
Then you will have your depression, mood disorders. As I said to you, Prof. Kaji said, the OCD, the paranoia. They don't sleep, right? They don't sleep at night. Often these attacks happen at night, and they are told that you've got to leave now. So in the darkness of night, where there's no power as well, no electricity, they just got to trek with all their goods and their belongings and with their families. So all of this paints a very gloomy picture of what the implications of living under a genocide, occupation, war, and all of that translates into. And so in terms of So this is trauma. This is trauma. They're experiencing trauma. And if trauma is not addressed, it will be stored and locked in the brain and in the body. And much later on in life, whenever there are triggers that mimic something about the war, it could be a smell, a taste, a sound, the sound of the siren. It can be any of those things. And then they will have these triggers that will keep coming up, even if they're trying to live.
It seems we have just a little bit of break on transmission. Let's see if we can get Zohra Sooliman back. We are chatting about the mental health conditions within Palestine and as she elaborates some of the manifestations that they could possibly experience. Zohra, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you. I didn't know that I was disconnected or.
Marv, you were just touching on, something that could just trigger these symptoms and manifestations. Could you, just continue from there?
Yes. So what happens is, let's say the war will be over, inshallah, soon, but then they've got to continue with their normal living. They're going to have to pick up their lives and reconstruct from the rubble. And to just tell you, the research states that an average teenager of 15 years has lived through 5 wars.
Yeah.
And that tells you that war is something that's normal to them. However, that doesn't mean that they aren't affected, that they don't have the traumatic, that it doesn't have that continuous traumatic stress on them. So the new thinking is that if trauma is not nipped in the bud, then it can cause problems later on in the individual's life. So we plan to take in a group of psychologists. Our psychologists are trained in trauma-informed modalities, which means that you will work directly with the trauma. Normally, the understanding of people going for psychotherapy is that you go to a psychologist, you go there, you talk to the person, they listen to you, and you make several appointments. And to actually overcome whatever your challenge is, it can take months, it can even take up to a year or more. But with the new modalities that we are trained in, they are specifically targeting trauma. And so, inshallah, when we go in, we will be working with, using these new modalities, inshallah, and working with groups, because you're there for a limited amount of time. So in the time that you are there, you're going to maximize your efforts. So we'll be doing lots of group work and and some individual work as well. But we'll try to cover as many people using our techniques in group work.
Can you share any personal stories or experiences from your work in Palestine that maybe highlight the intersection of mental health and the lack of basic necessities? And if you could please add any success stories or examples of resilience, as we know that they, at the moment, they are extremely resilient. Also from your work with individuals or communities in Palestine, highlighting their ability to overcome adversity.
The Palestinian people, they are at a different level when it comes to their iman and their taqwa and their level of resilience. They actually call resilience, that we use as an English word in psychology, they have the Arabic word, which is sumud, which means steadfastness. So they've got full trust in Allah. And you'll often hear them say, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. When we visited people, I was there in 2009, and when you meet the families, we used to go to their homes or to the refugee camps, to the schools, orphanages. We went to primary schools, high schools. We went to hospitals. We worked with people at different centers and different levels of society. And they are extremely resilient, and their iman is way stronger than ours. And there's a hadith to the effect that says that when Allah bestowed beauty in the world, he gave 9/10 to Palestine.
Yes.
And when he bestowed suffering, he also bestowed 9/10 to Palestine. I mean, you know, if there's somebody who knows the hadith better, please correct it.
Yes, I'd love to.
But that's what I remember. And we went to the schools, and we looked at these girls, such bright faces, full of noor, and so much of energy as they're talking to us.
Yeah.
And we asked them, how do you manage to be like that? And they said, because they have full trust in whatever Allah, destines for them, they have full trust and they accept that.
Yes, Allah.
They at that point, many of those girls in the high school had told us that they had lost brothers or fathers, or maybe 2 or 3 members of their family.
Yeah.
And these girls would come to school, they'd go back home, and then they'd help their mothers or whoever is there at home to clean up the rubble. Not clean the house as we understand it. They're busy cleaning up the rubble, sweeping, cleaning up, using that rubble to rebuild something if they can use it. And they were doing hibs. They were still doing their hibs.
Yes,
and we've seen a lot of those stories right now where people are still doing the hibs, and they've actually increased that concentration of that. One of the very sad stories, and there were many, but one that comes to mind now, we worked in a hospital with allied health professionals, and I think these were physiotherapists and occupational therapists, and had said to us that during that war in 2009, their neighbor had been killed.
So apologies for that breaking transmission, but we'll get to know that story just after the short break. A beautiful story. Zohra Sooliman, co-founder of Gift to the Givers, will be sharing with us. Let's just quickly pay the bills and we'll come back with more. Welcome back, Assalamu alaikum. And in anticipation, we heard that story from co-founder of Gift to the Givers and director for counselling, so key line counselling services at Gift to the Givers, Zohra Sooliman, talking to us about a heartwarming story in Palestine. And so, Zohra, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Awesome. So, I think we lost you somewhere where you said the young girl and her mom were cleaning the house, not as we clean the house, sweep the dust. They were cleaning up rubble. That's their cleanup in their homes.
Yes. Yes, that's what all the girls at the high school said to us, that's what they go, and that's their normal daily routine. They wake up in the morning, come to school, in the afternoons they go back home, and that is what they try to do. Try to bring their house back to something normal. It's been bombed, it's been broken. They clean up and they use the rubble to fix the parts that are broken. So maybe a window has been broken or a part of a wall. They will use the rubble to rebuild and restore their house. So we found that, that's extreme resilience and positivity from them, despite having just gone through a war. The one very sad story, as I said, that comes to mind is that of he was either a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist, and we went to this hospital. And he recalled the story of when his neighbor had died, a woman had died, and no one could go and pick up the body and, bury it. So for 3 days, it lay outside.
Sure.
And they were watching this body outside from inside their houses. And after a while, they saw that the dogs were coming to eat the body.
Sure.
Which was a very, very sad, story, because the lady did not have a dignified funeral the way we have, immediately after the passing away of the person. Immediately we make janazah preparations and we do it as quick as possible. But in Gaza, bodies lie there for long. Everyone has seen the visuals coming through social media, and some very, very, very sad visuals from there.
Yeah, some that I think going through some visuals for shows that I had to edit. I couldn't sleep for days. I think I needed a debriefing. Let's talk about trauma and the shaping of long-term trauma and the mental state of individuals living in these targeted genocidal zones like Palestine. And you've mentioned earlier on, little things can trigger them when the dust settles. But what long-term effects does this have on Palestinians, shaping their lives, and how does it affect their ability to cope and thrive every day?
So I believe there's a lot of work to do in Gaza, as we're going to say, reconstruction and development, not just from a physical and structural level, but I think even from their mental health. It's lots of work that needs to be done, probably decades, but and it's going to need the help of every part of the world. There are lots and lots of organizations that have been in or are preparing to go in. And so we're really going to have to make sure that our focus is on Gaza because of this long-term damage in the mental health of the people of Gaza. The kind of, gruesome, inhumane kind of tortures that were carried out on them. The way they come and tell you leave your house, just carry whatever you can in that half an hour or whatever time they give you, sometimes even shorter, and you need to leave. Can you imagine? Just moving house, I think, is number 3 on the stressor list. Can you imagine this displacement and multiple displacement? Loss, multiple loss. And the list goes on, because they're not just losing loved ones, they're losing home, the education is disrupted. They don't go to school like normal. They don't go to work like normal. Those who have had jobs, even although 40% of the population is unemployed, but those who have had jobs can't go to work. So their lives are completely disrupted. And the moment the ceasefire happens, they're going to have to start to bring some sense of normality into their lives. Look around Gaza, look at what buildings can still be used, whether there is any structural integrity in them. The other parts that are completely damaged and cannot be used, the rebuilding and the restoring will have to happen. And in terms of mental health, there's going to be a lot of work to be done. But like I said, with this new modalities and techniques that are around now in the last, I would say, 15, 20 years, you can work with that, and you can allow them to work with their trauma, heal them from their trauma, so that those traumatic memories, when they are triggered maybe later on, they don't have the same emotional and psychological intensity. So, where they would suddenly go into panic mode, or they would suddenly hyperventilate, or the sadness or the depression will come back to them. With these techniques, they will still remember the situation. They'll still have a memory of what happened, but at least the emotional intensity and the sensorial associations around it would be removed or drastically reduced.
Zohra, in your opinion, what are some of the practical steps that can be taken at both local, national, and international levels to address, the immediate humanitarian needs and long-term mental health challenges faced by these Palestinians? What mental health services support do they need, both locally and internationally? And I think to wrap up, inshallah, what is your message of solidarity in support that you'd like to convey to the people of Palestinians who are struggling with these mental health amidst these challenging manifestations, and also possibly a message of hope or encouragement? What would you like to say to viewers who may be feeling overwhelmed by the scale of suffering in Palestine?
So I think a lot is already being done. First of all, I think we've made history where South Africa took Israel to the ICJ. And although we didn't hear ceasefire, but at least they acknowledged that Israel, for once after 75 years, Israel didn't, that victim mentality of theirs at least was in some way debunked. And so I think from an international level, I think that was a big what would I say, a big boon for us. Nationally and locally, I think there are, I speak for us, Gift of the Givers here in South Africa. Like us, there are many other organizations here in South Africa as well as international. And some of them we are networking with. So everybody is planning to take in aid of different types. Everybody, whether it's medical, whether it will be building and redevelopment, whether it would be all kinds of, at different levels of functioning. So I think that is there already. My concern is only that it must be sustainable. I fear that once there's a ceasefire and, maybe we will not be getting that many social media posts and things like that, and then people will become slack and they will forget about them. And the momentum that we've had over this last 4 months, my only concern is that must not stop.
Yeah.
And it must carry on. We must keep fighting for the cause of the Palestinians. I'd like to say to them, we are with you and we are behind you. In our countries, in all countries of the world, there's been protests, there's been night vigils, there's been dhikr, fasting, in lots of, prayer and khatams and all of these things that we are doing for the people of Palestine. And the main thing is, I think, the boycott, the boycotting of all Israeli products.
Yes.
We need to be very vigilant about that.
Yes.
And also companies that support Israel. And then your last question of what message of hope could we give to our viewers? Ramadan is on our doorstep. I think we've got nearly 40 days to Ramadan. And it's usually the time when people are dispensing with their zakah, their sadaqah, all kinds of charity. Okay. And I would urge you that please, when you are allocating your zakat and your charity, please allocate a large portion because Palestine needs it. Palestine is going to have to be rebuilt from the rubble and from the ground up. Okay. So they're going to need lots of financial support, lots of moral support, lots of other structural support, neighboring countries support.
Yes, yes.
It's going to be, they need just a lot of support.
Absolutely.
In every way possible.
Yes.
So from our side, I think if we can, allocate our donations to them,
inshallah.
Firstly for the basics now,
yeah.
And then much later to development.
Jazakallah khair for your time, Zohra Sooliman, co-founder for Gift to the Givers and director of the counselling services, the Key Line Counselling Services, as well as the Compassionate Counselling Psychologist. We appreciate your time and we hope to speak to you soon as well to give us an update on the situation in Gaza. All the best till we chat to you again. Wassalamu alaikum. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Ameen. Jazakallah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
A heartfelt gratitude to co-founder of Gift to the Givers, Zohra Sooliman, and we appreciate her time, compassionate counselling psychologist, for sharing her expertise and shedding light on the important yet concerning topic. Through these valuable insights, we've gained a deeper understanding on the psychological impact of living in a conflict, rather genocidal region, and the urgent need for mental health and support in Palestine. Let us continue to stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine, offering our support and compassion as they navigate the challenges of daily life with resilience and strength. Stay tuned to our next show. We speak to Sheikha Ruqayya Samsuddin, who guides us on how to instill the love of Quran in our parenting edition from a very early age. From myself, Hawa Sooliman, wassalamu alaikum and goodbye.